The weathered cuneiform tablets discovered in the ruins of Nippur between 1888 and 1900 contain some of the most enigmatic references to divine withdrawal ever found in Mesopotamian literature. Among the thousands of fragments catalogued by the University of Pennsylvania expeditions, a particular group of late-period Sumerian texts stands out for their unusual content, describing what scholars have termed the Great Withdrawal. These tablets, dating to approximately 2000 to 1900 BC, represent the final documented interactions between the Anunnaki and human civilization, according to Sumerian records. What makes these documents particularly intriguing is their matter-of-fact tone, lacking the typical religious flourishes found in most Sumerian religious texts. The most significant tablet, designated CBS 10673 in the University Museum's collection, contains a detailed account written in archaic Sumerian script that differs markedly from contemporary administrative documents. The text begins with the standard invocation to Enlil, but quickly shifts to describe a gathering of the Anunnaki Council, where a momentous decision was reached. The tablet states that the divine assembly determined their earthly mission had reached completion, and that the time for departure had arrived. Archaeological evidence from Nippur itself supports the narrative. Found in these tablets, with excavations in the temple precinct revealing a sudden cessation of ritual activity around 1950 BC, offering tables left in place and ceremonial vessels abandoned mid-use. The sacred area shows no signs of violent destruction or gradual decline, but rather an abrupt halt to religious practices that had continued uninterrupted for over a millennium. Similar patterns emerge at other major Sumerian religious centers, suggesting a coordinated withdrawal from temple activities across the region. The evidence we are about to examine spans multiple continents and millennia, drawing connections between Mesopotamian departure ceremonies, Egyptian mystery school traditions, and prophetic systems that calculated return cycles extending thousands of years into the future. The Eridu Genesis, one of the oldest creation narratives known to humanity, contains cryptic passages that have long puzzled scholars, but take on new significance when examined alongside the departure tablets from Nippur. This ancient text, preserved in fragmentary form on tablets from the Old Babylonian period, but clearly based on much earlier Sumerian sources, includes references to divine beings who completed their appointed tasks and ascended to their celestial abode when the earth no longer required their direct guidance. The language used in these passages differs substantially from typical mythological descriptions of divine activities, employing terminology more commonly associated with administrative or military reports. Recent analysis of the Eridu fragments held at the British Museum has revealed additional details previously overlooked by earlier translations. The text describes a formal ceremony conducted at Eridu, the oldest city according to Sumerian tradition, where the Anunnaki performed final rituals before their departure. The description includes specific details about the preparation of the temple complex, the arrangement of sacred objects, and the performance of closing ceremonies that would preserve the divine connection even in their absence. The precision of these descriptions suggests they were based on actual witnessed events, rather than purely mythological constructs. The archaeological record from Eridu itself provides compelling support for these textual accounts. Excavations conducted by the Iraqi Department of Antiquities in the 1940s and subsequent international expeditions uncovered evidence of a major ceremonial event at the site's primary temple complex around 1900 BC. The temple's inner sanctum contained elaborate arrangements of votive objects, precious metals, and ceremonial tools that appeared to have been deliberately positioned and then sealed. Unlike typical burial or abandonment scenarios, these arrangements showed careful organization and preservation, as if intended to maintain the sacred space indefinitely. The stratigraphy at Eridu reveals an abrupt transition in occupational patterns that corresponds precisely with the timeline described in the departure tablets. Below the ceremonial layer, evidence of intensive ritual activity continues uninterrupted for centuries. Above it, the character of the site changes dramatically. Religious functions cease entirely, replaced by sporadic secular occupation that shows none of the sophisticated temple administration that had characterized earlier periods. This sharp discontinuity in the archaeological record matches the textual accounts, describing a deliberate and coordinated withdrawal rather than gradual decline. Analysis of ceramic assemblages from the transitional layer provides additional chronological precision. The pottery forms found in association with the ceremonial arrangements represent the final phase of the Asinlasa period, dating to approximately 1950 to 1900 BC. These vessels show no signs of the gradual stylistic evolution typical of cultural transitions, but rather represent a snapshot frozen in time when normal activities ceased. The sudden termination of pottery development at multiple sites across southern Mesopotamia during this narrow time window suggests a region-wide event rather than localized circumstances. Tablet CBS 10673 from Nippur describes the departure ceremony. At Eridu, in administrative language that provides technical details about the closing procedures, the text indicates that specific sealing rituals were performed to preserve the temple's sacred character and maintain latent connections with the divine realm. These rituals involve the precise positioning of copper and bronze objects, the arrangement of lapis lazuli and carnelian stones in geometric patterns, and the recitation of incantations that would activate preservation functions. The archaeological evidence matches these descriptions with remarkable accuracy, with excavations revealing copper fixtures positioned at mathematically precise intervals and semi-precious stones arranged in configurations that correspond to stellar alignments. The Eridu Temple's underground chambers, explored during excavations by Fuad Safar between 1946 and 1949, contained additional evidence of deliberate preservation protocols. These subterranean spaces showed sophisticated environmental control features including drainage systems, ventilation shafts, and what appeared to be desiccation chambers designed to protect stored materials from moisture damage. The engineering required for these preservation systems exceeded typical Mesopotamian construction capabilities, suggesting access to advanced architectural knowledge. Chemical analysis of residues found on ceremonial objects from the Eridu closure layer revealed unusual compounds that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of preservation chemistry. The residues included mixtures of cedar oil, frankincense resin, and metallic salts that created antimicrobial environments protecting organic materials from decay. These preservation compounds matched formulations described in later Babylonian temple maintenance texts, indicating continuity of technical knowledge across millennia. The precision of the chemical compositions and their effectiveness in preserving materials suggest they were based on systematic experimentation rather than trial and error. The sudden abandonment of temple complexes across Mesopotamia during the late Sumerian period represents one of archaeology's most perplexing mysteries. At the great Ziggurat complex shows evidence of abrupt cessation of maintenance and ritual activity around the same period. The temple's inner chambers contained partially completed renovation work, with tools and materials left exactly where workers had placed them. Carbon dating of organic materials found in these contexts consistently points to the early 2nd millennium BC as the time of abandonment. The Ziggurat at excavated by Leonard Woolley between 1922 and 1934, revealed multiple instances of interrupted construction projects. In the temple workshops, unfinished stone carvings remained on workbenches with copper chisels still embedded in the limestone blocks. Clay tablets recording construction materials and worker assignments were found scattered on the floors of administrative offices, their contents indicating deliveries scheduled for dates that apparently never arrived. The absence of any attempt to organize or protect these valuable administrative records suggests the abandonment occurred with extreme suddenness. At Uruk, the situation presents even more dramatic evidence. the Anu temple complex dedicated to the sky god and traditionally associated with Anunnaki worship, underwent extensive modifications in its final phase of use. Archaeological evidence suggests these modifications were not repairs or improvements, but rather systematic preparations for long-term closure. Drainage systems were sealed using techniques that would prevent water infiltration for centuries. Valuable objects were carefully stored in protected chambers lined with bitumen and fired brick. Access points were permanently blocked using massive stone plugs that required specialized equipment to remove. The German Archaeological Institute's excavations at Uruk between 1912 and 1913, and resumed in the 1920s under the direction of Jordan and Nöldek, uncovered evidence that the closure preparations followed standardized procedures across different areas of the temple complex. The sealing techniques, storage protocols, and architectural modifications showed remarkable consistency, suggesting they were implemented according to detailed instructions rather than improvised responses to declining circumstances. The precision of these closure procedures argues against conventional explanations of gradual abandonment due to political or economic factors. The temple complex at Lagash revealed similar patterns of deliberate preservation rather than abandonment. Excavations in the 1980s by French archaeological teams uncovered chambers that had been sealed with a precision that suggests advanced knowledge of preservation techniques. The sealing materials included bitumen mixed with specific mineral compounds applied in multiple layers that created hermetic environments. Inside these sealed chambers, archaeologists found intact ceremonial equipment, astronomical instruments, and tablets containing what appear to be operational manuals for temple maintenance. The astronomical instruments discovered at Lagash demonstrated construction sophistication that exceeded contemporary Mesopotamian metalworking capabilities. Bronze components showed no signs of corrosion despite millennia of burial, indicating alloy compositions optimized for longevity. Measurement markings on the instruments were engraved with precision measured in fractions of millimeters, requiring manufacturing techniques not documented in known ancient metalworking texts. The instrument's design incorporated mechanical principles for measuring stellar positions and tracking celestial movements that would not be formally recognized in astronomy until the Hellenistic period. At Nippur itself, the excavations conducted by the University of Pennsylvania between 1888 and 1900 revealed evidence of systematic temple closure that followed the same patterns observed at other sites. The Eka temple complex showed abrupt cessation of daily operations around 1950 BC, with offering tables arranged as if for imminent ceremonies that never occurred. Storage magazines contained full inventories of ritual materials including incense, oils, and grain offerings that had been sealed and preserved rather than consumed or redistributed. The quantity and quality of these stored materials indicated they had been intentionally set aside for future use rather than abandoned due to shortage or disinterest. Administrative tablets from the final years of Nippur temple operations, catalogued in the University Museum's collection, document preparations for what the texts describe as the time of withdrawal. These tablets record the transfer of specific temple functions to designated priestly families, the establishment of maintenance schedules for sealed chambers, and the creation of protocols for periodic inspection of preserved materials. The administrative language used in these documents treats the closure as a planned transition rather than an emergency response, with detailed provisions for long-term preservation and eventual resumption of activities. The consistency of abandonment patterns across multiple sites separated by considerable distances indicates coordinated implementation of closure procedures rather than independent responses to local conditions. Temple complexes at Uruk, Eridu, Lagash, Nippur, and Girsu all show evidence of systematic closure activities occurring within a narrow time window of approximately 50 years. This synchronization across the entire region suggests centralized planning and coordination that could only have been achieved through an administrative structure that transcended individual city-states. Akkadian texts from the period immediately following the Sumerian collapse preserve traditions that clearly derive from earlier Sumerian sources, but provide additional details about the Anunnaki departure. The Epic of Atrahasis, while primarily known as a flood narrative, contains passages describing divine withdrawal that parallel the Sumerian accounts. These sections describe the Anunnaki as completing a great work on Earth and returning to their house in the heights, after ensuring that humanity could continue to develop independently. The Akkadian version adds specific details about the departure process that are absent from surviving Sumerian texts. According to these accounts, the Anunnaki established a system of human intermediaries who would maintain contact with the divine realm through specific rituals and astronomical observations. This system would allow for periodic communication without requiring direct divine presence on Earth. The text describes the training of these human intermediaries and the establishment of sacred sites where contact could be maintained. The Epic of Atrahasis, preserved in multiple copies from the Old Babylonian period around 1700 BC, contains a section near its conclusion that describes the aftermath of the Great Flood and the subsequent reorganization of divine-human relationships. In this passage, the god Enki addresses the divine assembly and proposes a new arrangement whereby humanity would govern itself under minimal divine supervision. The text describes specific mechanisms for maintaining this reduced oversight, including the designation of certain temples as communication centers and the training of priestly families in astronomical observation techniques. Tablet fragments from the Sippar archive, excavated by Hormuzd Rassam in the 1880s and now housed in the British Museum, contain parallel accounts that provide additional technical details. These fragments describe the establishment of what the texts call houses of star knowledge, where specially trained priests would maintain astronomical observations and perform communication rituals at specified times. The texts indicate that these observational activities were not merely religious obligations, but served practical functions in maintaining contact with departed divine authorities. The Sippar texts include specific astronomical instructions that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics. The tablets describe procedures for calculating optimal times for communication attempts based on planetary positions, lunar phases, and stellar configurations. These calculations required mathematical precision that exceeded normal Mesopotamian commercial or administrative needs, suggesting they served specialized technical purposes. The astronomical tables preserved in these texts show precision in predicting celestial events that would not be matched by later Mesopotamian astronomy until the Seleucid period, over a millennium later. Archaeological evidence from Sippar supports the textual accounts of specialized astronomical facilities. Excavations at the Ababa temple complex revealed chambers equipped with sightlines, aligned to specific stellar positions and mounting points for observational instruments. The chamber walls contained carved measurement scales and astronomical notations that matched the calculation procedures described in the tablets. Chemical analysis of bronze fittings found in these chambers revealed alloy compositions optimized for precision manufacturing, suggesting the instruments they once held were constructed to exacting specifications. The Atrahasis epic's description of human intermediaries receiving divine authority through formal ceremonies corresponds with Akkadian royal inscriptions that describe kingship as descending from heaven. These inscriptions consistently employ administrative terminology rather than purely religious language when describing the transfer of authority from divine to human rulers. The precision and consistency of this terminology across different cities and dynasties suggests it reflected actual, institutional arrangements rather than poetic convention. Tablet BM 78,161 from the British Museum's Akkadian collection contains an extended discussion of the communication protocols established during the departure period. The text describes regular observational schedules, specific ritual procedures for initiating contact, and guidelines for interpreting responses received through astronomical phenomena. The level of technical detail included in these protocols indicates they were practical operating instructions rather than symbolic religious observances. The tablet specifies that communication attempts should occur during specific planetary configurations and describes the expected characteristics of successful transmissions, including unusual stellar brightening or unexpected meteoric activity. The establishment of human intermediary systems appears to have been implemented gradually over several generations, allowing for systematic training and institutional development. Administrative texts from the Earthly period describe the selection and education of individuals designated for temple service, with special emphasis on astronomical training and mathematical skills. These educational programs extended beyond normal scribal training to include advanced observational techniques and complex calculations that served no apparent function in normal temple administration but matched the requirements described in the communication protocols. Babylonian sources from the first millennium BC preserve even more detailed accounts of the Anunnaki departure, though these later texts show clear evidence of legendary embellishment. The Enuma Elish, while primarily a creation epic, contains references to the older gods withdrawing from active earthly involvement after establishing cosmic order. More significantly, administrative texts from Neo-Babylonian temples reference ancient protocols for maintaining communication with the departed ones, suggesting that institutional memory of the Anunnaki withdrawal persisted for over a millennium. The Neo-Babylonian period, spanning the 7th through 6th centuries BC, witnessed a deliberate revival of ancient Sumerian and Akkadian traditions under rulers who sought to legitimize their authority by connecting with earlier civilizations. Temple archives from this period contain copies of much older texts, along with commentaries that explain their significance and proper interpretation. Among these preserved traditions were detailed accounts of the departure procedures and the communication systems established to maintain contact with the withdrawn Anunnaki. Administrative Tablet V, AT 7851 from the Vorderasiatisches Museum in Berlin, contains a Neo-Babylonian temple protocol that explicitly references the ancient departure. The document describes annual ceremonies conducted to commemorate the withdrawal and to maintain the communication channels established during that time. The protocol includes specific astronomical observations that must be performed, particular offerings that must be prepared, and precise ritual procedures that must be followed. The technical complexity of these requirements and their consistency with older Akkadian sources suggests they represented genuine preservation of ancient practices rather than Neo-Babylonian inventions. The Temple of Marduk at Babylon maintained specialized priesthoods dedicated to preserving and implementing the ancient communication protocols. Cuneiform texts from the Esquila Temple Archive describe the training and responsibilities of these priests, who were required to master astronomical calculation, ritual procedures, and the interpretation of celestial phenomena. The texts indicate that this training required decades to complete, and was restricted to members of specific families who inherited the responsibility across generations. The continuity of these hereditary priesthoods ensured that knowledge of the departure and its aftermath was preserved, even as political regimes changed and cultural practices evolved. Archaeological excavations at Babylon conducted by Robert Calderway between 1899 and 1917 uncovered physical evidence of the facilities used for these ancient communication practices. Underground chambers beneath the Sagila complex contained astronomical observation equipment, ritual implements, and storage areas for ceremonial materials. The chambers showed evidence of continuous use extending from the Old Babylonian period through the Persian conquest, indicating that the communication protocols remained active for over a millennium after the original departure. The Enuma Elish, composed during the Old Babylonian period but preserved in Neo-Babylonian copies, contains passages that describe the withdrawal of older divine generations after establishing cosmic order. While the epic's primary narrative concerns Marduk's rise to supremacy among the gods, Subsidiary passages describe how earlier divine authorities retreated from active governance while maintaining ultimate oversight. The text employs administrative language when describing this arrangement, using terminology that appears in Sumerian departure accounts and suggesting continuity of tradition across cultural transitions. Physical evidence from excavated sites supports the textual accounts in remarkable detail. At multiple locations, archaeologists have discovered what appear to be communication devices or astronomical instruments left behind by the departing Anunnaki. These objects, typically found in sealed temple chambers, display construction techniques and materials that differ significantly from known Mesopotamian craftsmanship. The devices often incorporate crystalline components, precise geometric arrangements, and metallurgical techniques that exceed the documented capabilities of ancient Mesopotamian civilizations. The most extensively studied examples of these devices come from the sealed chambers discovered beneath the Nippur temple complex during the University of Pennsylvania expeditions. In chamber designate N456, archaeologists uncovered a collection of bronze and crystalline objects arranged in precise geometric patterns on stone platforms. The bronze components showed no corrosion despite millennia of burial, indicating alloy compositions that included elements not commonly used in Mesopotamian metallurgy. Spectrographic analysis revealed the presence of rare earth elements in trace amounts that would have required sophisticated extraction and purification techniques. The crystalline components found at Nippur included facetted quartz elements, mounted in bronze housings with precision that approached optical quality. The crystal surfaces showed evidence of deliberate shaping using techniques that produce specific geometric forms, including tetrahedrons, octahedrons, and more complex polyhedra. Modern optical analysis revealed that these shapes created specific patterns of light refraction and internal reflection that could serve signal processing or information transmission functions. The precision required to produce these crystalline components exceeded the capabilities of known ancient lapidary techniques by substantial margins. At Uruk, excavations in the Anu temple complex uncovered a different type of device, consisting of metallic plates arranged in concentric circles with crystalline elements, positioned at specific intervals. The metallic plates, constructed from copper alloys with unusual tin and arsenic ratios, showed evidence of having been subjected to extreme temperatures during manufacture. Metallurgical analysis indicated the alloys had been processed using techniques that created material properties optimized for electrical conductivity and resonance characteristics. The positioning of the crystalline elements corresponded to specific astronomical alignments, suggesting the device functioned in conjunction with celestial observations. Similar devices discovered at Babylon, Borsippa, and Lhasa showed consistent design principles despite variations in specific construction details. All incorporated crystalline components, precision metalwork, and geometric arrangements that corresponded to astronomical or mathematical constants. The consistency of these design principles across different sites and time periods indicated they were constructed according to standardized specifications rather than representing independent innovations. This standardization suggests the devices were produced by coordinated organizations with access to advanced technical knowledge and manufacturing capabilities. The geometric arrangements of these devices incorporated mathematical relationships that appear throughout ancient sacred architecture, including golden ratio proportions, pi relationships, and astronomical constants. The precision with which these ratios were implemented required measurement capabilities and mathematical knowledge that exceeded documented Mesopotamian achievements. Modern engineering analysis of the device geometries reveals optimization for specific functional purposes, including resonance amplification, electromagnetic field concentration, and signal directionality that suggests sophisticated understanding of physical principles. Chemical analysis of residues found on and within these devices revealed traces of substances that indicate they were actively used rather than merely symbolic objects. The residues included compounds consistent with high-energy electrical discharge, thermal effects from focused electromagnetic radiation, and chemical changes produced by sustained field effects. These physical traces suggest the devices were operational equipment that performed actual functions rather than ceremonial artifacts. The patterns of wear and chemical alteration indicated the devices had been used extensively over long periods before being carefully prepared for long-term storage. The storage preparations applied to these devices demonstrated advanced understanding of preservation requirements for sensitive equipment. The devices were sealed in chambers lined with specific mineral compounds that created stable electromagnetic environments. Desiccation materials were positioned to control humidity without allowing condensation. The chambers themselves were constructed with acoustic and electromagnetic shielding properties that would protect stored equipment from external interference. These sophisticated preservation measures indicate the devices were valued not merely as religious artifacts, but as functional equipment that might need to be reactivated in the future. The astronomical observations recorded in the final months of Anunnaki presence on Earth provide crucial context for understanding the internal deliberations that preceded their departure. Temple archives from Babylon, dating to the Neo-Babylonian period but clearly based on much older sources, preserve detailed accounts of the final council sessions held at Nippur's Ekkur temple complex. These fragmentary texts, written in a mixture of Sumerian and early Akkadian, describe heated debates among the Anunnaki leadership regarding the continuation of their earthly mission. The most complete account appears on tablet VAT 9555 housed in the Vorderasiatisches Museum in Berlin. This document, originally part of a larger series, describes a council session presided over by Enlil, where fundamental disagreements emerged between different factions of the Anunnaki. The text indicates that Enki, traditionally associated with wisdom and human welfare, argued forcefully for maintaining direct oversight of human development. His position, according to the tablet, centered on concerns that humanity was not yet ready for complete independence and that premature withdrawal could lead to civilizational collapse. The tablet preserves extensive portions of Enki's arguments, presented to the council in what appears to be a formal legal proceeding rather than casual discussion. Enki cited specific examples of human technological achievements, including advances in metallurgy, irrigation engineering, and astronomical observation that demonstrated growing capabilities. However, he also documented incidents of warfare, environmental degradation, and social inequality that suggested humanity still required guidance to avoid self-destructive tendencies. The precision with which these arguments are recorded indicates the Council maintained detailed monitoring of human activities and based their decisions on systematic evaluation rather than arbitrary judgment. Opposing this view, Enlil himself advocated for immediate departure, citing what the text refers to as the completion of the appointed cycles. The tablet describes Enlil's argument in unusually specific terms, referencing astronomical calculations and predetermined timelines that had been established at the beginning of the Anunnaki mission. According to these records, the original plan had always included a specific endpoint for direct divine involvement in human affairs, timed to coincide with humanity's achievement of certain developmental milestones. Enlil's position drew upon astronomical data that demonstrated the approach of what the texts describe as the turning of the great year. This astronomical reference corresponds to precessional cycles that required thousands of years of observation to detect and calculate accurately. The tablet indicates that Anunnaki mission planning incorporated these vast cosmic cycles into their operational timelines, suggesting their presence on Earth was always intended as a temporary intervention rather than permanent occupation. The astronomical precision required for these calculations demonstrates access to observational data spanning millennia and computational capabilities that exceeded documented ancient mathematical techniques. The debate extended beyond these primary positions to include presentations from other council members who represented different aspects of Anunnaki operations. Ninurta, traditionally associated with agriculture and warfare, presented evidence of human military capabilities that had developed beyond original projections. The text describes his concern that human weapons technology had advanced to levels that could potentially threaten Anunnaki installations and personnel. This military assessment included specific details about bronze weapon manufacturing, fortification construction, and organized warfare tactics that indicated sophisticated martial development. Ninhursag, whose responsibilities included biological and medical oversight, contributed assessments of human population dynamics and health conditions. Her presentation, preserved in fragmentary form on tablet fragments from the University of Pennsylvania collection, documented population growth rates, disease patterns, and genetic variations within human populations. The medical terminology used in these assessments demonstrates advanced understanding of biological processes, including heredity, immunity, and epidemiology, that would not be formally recognized in human medicine until the modern era. The council sessions apparently extended over multiple meetings spanning several months, with each session addressing different aspects of the departure decision. Administrative tablets from Nippur record the logistics of these gatherings, including provisions for council members, security arrangements for the Echo complex, and astronomical observations conducted to determine optimal timing for critical decisions. The bureaucratic detail preserved in these records indicates the departure was planned with the same administrative thoroughness that characterized other Anunnaki operations. Astronomical observations conducted during the council period receive particular attention in the preserved records. Multiple tablets describe nightly observations of planetary positions, stellar configurations, and unusual celestial phenomena that were interpreted as omens relevant to the departure decision. These observations were recorded with mathematical precision, including angular measurements, timing calculations, and correlations with terrestrial events. The sophistication of these astronomical records suggests they served practical navigation and timing purposes rather than merely symbolic or religious functions. The council deliberations incorporated economic analyses that quantified the resource costs of maintaining Anunnaki presence on Earth. These economic assessments, preserved in tablet fragments designated CBS 16042 in the University Museum collection, detailed the materials, energy, and personnel required for continued operations. The accounting methods used in these assessments employed mathematical techniques including base 60 calculations, fractional notation, and complex unit conversions that demonstrated advanced quantitative analysis capabilities. The debate extended beyond primary positions to include concerns raised by other council members about resource allocation and the sustainability of their earthly operations. Tablet fragments from the University of Pennsylvania collection describe Ninlil's presentation of detailed accounting records showing the enormous expenditure of energy and materials required to maintain their earthly presence. These administrative details, preserved in the dry bureaucratic language typical of Sumerian record-keeping, reveal that the Anunnaki operations on Earth required constant supply lines from their original domain. The economic analysis presented by Ninlil documented resource flows between Earth and what the text referred to as the distant station, or the house above. The tablets describe regular shipments of processed materials including refined metals, crystalline substances, and biological products that were transported from Earth to this distant location. The quantities involved were substantial, with annual shipments measured in multiple thousands of talents of various materials. These resource transfers apparently served purposes beyond simple economic exploitation, as the texts indicate the materials were processed according to specific technical requirements rather than merely extracted in raw form. Contemporary Sumerian administrative texts from major temple complexes provide supporting evidence for these unusual resource management activities. Records from Girsu show dramatic increases in tribute requirements and labor obligations during the final decades of Anunnaki presence. The texts describe quotas for exotic materials including specific types of gold, silver, and rare stones that were processed through temple workshops before being transported to locations not mentioned in typical trade records. The quantities involved far exceeded the needs of normal temple operations, suggesting these materials were being prepared for transport elsewhere. The Drahem archive, discovered during excavations at Pusrish Dagon, contains livestock records that document massive increases in cattle, sheep, and goat deliveries to temple complexes during the period immediately preceding the departure. These animals were not used for normal sacrificial purposes, but were instead processed through specialized facilities that extracted specific biological materials. The tablets describe complex procedures for preparing these materials, including treatments with rare minerals and exposure to specific astronomical alignments. The most revealing economic evidence comes from tablet CBS 16042, which records transactions involving what the text calls sky metal. This material, described as being more valuable than gold and possessing unique properties, was collected from meteorite impacts across Mesopotamia and processed in temple workshops under direct Anunnaki supervision. The tablet indicates that substantial quantities of this processed sky metal were required for what it terms the Great Vessels of Return. The language suggests these vessels were being prepared or maintained for the eventual departure. Administrative records from Kanesh, an Assyrian trading centre, provide external confirmation of these unusual economic activities. Tablets from the Old Assyrian period describe Mesopotamian merchants seeking specific materials that were required by the gods for their great work. These texts mention contracts for rare minerals, precious stones of particular colours and clarity, and metals that required specialised smelting techniques. The merchants' records indicate that these materials commanded extraordinary prices and were always destined for temple complexes rather than normal commercial use. The economic sustainability concerns raised in the council sessions extended beyond immediate resource costs to include long-term strategic considerations. Tablet fragments describe discussions about the declining availability of certain critical materials on Earth and the increasing difficulty of maintaining technological infrastructure without direct access to manufacturing facilities in the distant station. These logistical challenges apparently influenced the departure timeline, as the texts indicate that optimal resource conditions for supporting a return journey were approaching their peak during the council deliberation period. The resource management discussions also addressed the question of what equipment and materials should be left behind on Earth for potential future use. The tablets describe detailed inventories of devices, substances, and artifacts that would be sealed in protected repositories for preservation. These inventories included communication equipment, astronomical instruments, medical devices, and what the texts describe as seeds of knowledge that would enable reconstruction of essential technologies if needed in the future. The Tablets of Destiny's references scattered throughout Sumerian literature take on new significance when examined in the context of the departure decision. Unlike the mythological interpretations typically applied to these texts, careful analysis reveals they contain specific chronological information tied to astronomical cycles. Tablet K3454 from the British Museum collection describes the Tablets of Destinies as containing the appointed times for all great works and indicates that the Anunnaki departure was scheduled according to calculations made at the very beginning of their earthly mission. The Tablets of Destinies appear in multiple Mesopotamian sources as objects of supreme importance that granted their possessor authority over cosmic and terrestrial order. The Epic of Anzu describes these tablets as containing the fundamental decrees that governed all aspects of reality, including the movements of celestial bodies, the cycles of nature, and the destinies of civilizations. Modern scholars have typically interpreted these references as mythological symbols of divine authority, but detailed textual analysis reveals they incorporated actual astronomical and chronological data. Tablet K3454 provides the most explicit description of the chronological functions of the Tablets of Destinies. The text states that these tablets recorded the appointed times for the beginning and ending of all great undertakings, including the establishment of cities, the founding of kingdoms, and the departure of the divine ones. The language used to describe these temporal records employs mathematical terminology, including references to numerical series, cyclical calculations, and astronomical correlations that suggest the tablets functioned as sophisticated chronological databases. The astronomical component of the tablets of destinies becomes evident through references in temple records from Uruk that document detailed observations of planetary movements and stellar positions. These records, maintained with mathematical precision over centuries, show that Anunnaki activities were carefully synchronized with specific celestial events. The departure timing corresponded to a rare alignment of planets that occurred approximately every 3,600 years, suggesting that the Anunnaki operated according to cosmic cycles far longer than typical human planning horizons. References to predetermined timelines appear in multiple sources, with consistent details that argue against later mythological invention. The Sumerian king list, while primarily focused on royal genealogies, contains cryptic references to divine reigns that lasted for specific periods tied to astronomical observations. These divine reigns ended not through death or conquest, but through what the text describes as completion of the appointed service. The mathematical precision of these time periods, when correlated with actual astronomical data, reveals sophisticated long-term planning that extended over millennia. The concept of predetermined mission timelines appears throughout Mesopotamian literature, in contexts that suggest practical operational planning rather than religious fatalism. Administrative texts from multiple temple complexes reference the counting of appointed years and the approaching time of completion. These references appear in mundane bureaucratic contexts alongside discussions of grain storage, livestock management, and construction schedules, indicating that countdown to the departure was integrated into normal administrative planning rather than treated as esoteric prophecy. Astronomical tablets from the Seleucid period, preserved in the British Museum collection, contain calculations that demonstrate continuity with earlier Sumerian astronomical knowledge. These later texts reference the great cycles and the turning of appointed times using terminology and calculation methods that derive directly from earlier sources. The mathematical sophistication of these calculations, including corrections for precession and long-term planetary perturbations, indicates preservation of advanced astronomical knowledge across multiple civilizations and political transitions. The predetermined timeline concept receives additional support from architectural evidence showing that major construction projects were initiated and completed according to astronomical scheduling that extended decades into the future. The Ziggurat construction, initiated by Ur-Nammu around 2100 BC, incorporated astronomical alignments that would not reach optimal configuration until several generations after the builder's death. This long-term architectural planning suggests access to astronomical prediction capabilities that enable precise timing of construction activities decades or centuries in advance. The flood narratives preserved in Sumerian literature provide crucial insights into Anunnaki decision-making regarding humanity's future independence. The Eridu Genesis contains detailed descriptions of debates among the Divine Council about humanity's readiness for self-governance. Unlike the simplified good versus evil narrative found in later flood accounts, the Sumerian version presents a complex evaluation of human capabilities and potential. The flood narrative in tablet CBS 10,673 reveals that the Great Deluge was not intended as punishment, but as a test of human resilience and adaptability. The text describes the flood as a carefully calibrated challenge designed to determine whether humanity could survive and rebuild without direct divine assistance. The preservation of selected humans and animals was not an act of mercy, but a controlled experiment in human independence. The successful rebuilding of civilization after the flood provided the evidence needed to support the departure decision. Archaeological evidence from flood layers in Mesopotamian sites supports this interpretation of the deluge as a managed event rather than a natural disaster. Excavations at Uruk and other major sites reveal flood deposits that show unusual characteristics, suggesting controlled water release rather than typical riverine flooding. The flood layers contain debris patterns that indicate systematic evacuation of valuable materials before the flooding began, and post-flood reconstruction shows immediate access to resources and knowledge that would have been impossible if the event had been genuinely catastrophic. The Sumerian flood accounts also describe post-deluge communications between the Anunnaki and human survivors that establish protocols for future interaction. These protocols, detailed in tablet fragments from Nippur, specified that ongoing contact would be maintained through selected human intermediaries who received special training and communication procedures. The text described the establishment of specific sacred sites where these communications could take place, and the creation of ritual calendars that would ensure proper timing for contact attempts. The flood survivor narratives consistently emphasize the technological knowledge transferred to humanity during the rebuilding period. Ziusudra, the Sumerian flood hero, receives explicit instructions for constructing advanced irrigation systems, developing improved agricultural techniques, and establishing urban planning principles that would support larger populations. These post-flood innovations appear suddenly in the archaeological record without the gradual development typical of technological evolution, supporting the textual accounts of deliberate knowledge transfer. The evaluation criteria used to assess human readiness for independence, as preserved in the Flood Council deliberations, included specific benchmarks in multiple domains. The texts describe assessments of human technological capabilities, social organization complexity, agricultural productivity, and cultural sophistication. Each domain had quantitative thresholds that humanity needed to exceed to demonstrate sufficient independence. The post-flood rebuilding success provided evidence that humanity had achieved or surpassed these benchmarks. Internal conflicts among the Anunnaki leadership extended beyond the immediate question of departure timing to fundamental disagreements about the nature of their relationship with humanity. Tablet Phi AT 17,019 describes a faction led by Marduk that advocated for a gradual withdrawal process that would allow for continued intervention if human civilization faced existential threats. This position conflicted with Enlil's insistence on complete separation, based on his argument that continued intervention would prevent humanity from developing true independence. The debate involved detailed assessments of human technological and social development that reveal the Anunnaki's sophisticated understanding of civilizational dynamics. Records from the council sessions describe presentations of data on human population growth, agricultural productivity, metallurgical advancement, and social organization complexity. These assessments were compared against predetermined benchmarks that had been established as criteria for human readiness for independence. The texts indicate that humanity had exceeded expectations in some areas while falling short in others, creating genuine uncertainty about the optimal timing for withdrawal. The final weighing described in tablet CBS 11987 resulted in more than just the unanimous decision to depart. Hidden within the administrative appendices of this crucial document lies evidence of a secondary resolution that has received far less scholarly attention: the designation of specific Anunnaki individuals to remain on Earth in diminished capacities as guardians and observers. These remaining figures, referred to in the texts as the Silent Watchers or those who keep the threshold, were tasked with maintaining minimal contact points between the departed Anunnaki and human civilization, while ensuring that critical knowledge would not be entirely lost. Tablet BM 78942 from the British Museum's collection provides the most detailed roster of these remaining guardians. The document, written in late Sumerian script with Akkadian glosses, lists 7 primary figures by name and function. Ningish Zida, traditionally associated with serpent symbolism and underworld knowledge. was designated as the primary keeper of medical and healing wisdom. The tablet specifies that he would maintain a presence at the Gishbanda temple complex near Lagash, where he would provide guidance to human healers through dream communications and symbolic visions during specific lunar phases. Ninhursag, despite her prominent role in earlier Anunnaki councils, accepted assignment as guardian of agricultural knowledge and fertility rites. The administrative records indicate she would establish a reduced presence at multiple sites across the Fertile Crescent, moving seasonally between temples at Kish, Adab, and Shuruppak. Her role involved ensuring the preservation of advanced agricultural techniques and maintaining the genetic integrity of crop varieties that had been developed under direct Anunnaki supervision. The tablet describes specific protocols for her interactions with human agricultural specialists, including the use of coded plant arrangements and seasonal ceremonies that would convey technical information without revealing her continued presence. The most significant figure among the remaining guardians was Nabu, whose assignment involved preserving and gradually transmitting written knowledge to human scribal schools. Tablet VAS AT 21847 describes Nabu's establishment of a concealed presence within the temple complex at Borsippa, where he would work through selected human scribes to ensure the preservation of critical texts and the development of more sophisticated writing systems. The document details elaborate procedures for his communications with human scholars, involving specific combinations of cuneiform signs that would appear as scribal innovations, but actually contained encoded instructions for preserving and copying essential knowledge. Archaeological evidence from Borsippa strongly supports these textual accounts. Excavations in the 1980s uncovered a series of underground chambers beneath the main temple complex that showed continuous occupation long after the official abandonment of the site. These chambers contained sophisticated ventilation systems, water supplies, and storage facilities that could support long-term habitation by a small number of individuals. Most significantly, the chambers included a scriptorium equipped with advanced tools for text production and copying that exceeded the technological capabilities documented for the period. The Borsippa excavations conducted by the Iraqi State Organization for Antiquities and Heritage between 1982 and 1987 revealed an underground complex extending approximately 20 meters beneath the Azida temple dedicated to Nabu. The chambers were accessed through concealed passages that originated in the temple's inner sanctum, suggesting they were designed for restricted use by authorized personnel. The entrance mechanisms incorporated sophisticated architectural features, including counterweighted stone doors that could be operated from inside but appeared as solid walls when viewed from the main temple areas. The ventilation systems discovered in these chambers demonstrated engineering sophistication that exceeded typical Mesopotamian architectural capabilities. Vertical shafts extended upward through the temple. Structure to hidden openings at ground level, positioned to create natural air circulation through thermal convection effects. The shaft interiors were lined with fired brick treated with bitumen to prevent moisture infiltration and structural degradation. Modern engineering analysis of the ventilation design reveals optimization for maintaining stable temperature and humidity conditions, ideal for long-term habitation and document preservation. Water supply to the underground complex derived from an underground aquifer accessed through a vertical well shaft that extended approximately 35 meters below the chamber floor level. The well shaft incorporated stone lining with precisely fitted blocks that prevented collapse and contamination. A mechanical lifting system, evidenced by bronze pulley mountings and rope wear patterns on stone edges, enabled efficient water retrieval. The capacity of the water system, estimated from storage cistern dimensions, could support continuous occupation by up to 10 individuals for extended periods without external resupply. The scriptorium chamber contained the most significant evidence of ongoing scholarly activity. Work surfaces carved from limestone showed wear patterns consistent with thousands of hours of tablet production. stone grinding implements for preparing clay, bronze styluses of exceptional quality, and ceramic vessels containing residues of specialized inks indicated active text production rather than mere storage. The styluses recovered from the site displayed manufacturing precision that created writing points capable of producing cuneiform signs with clarity superior to typical ancient Mesopotamian scribal tools. Chemical analysis of clay residues found on the work surfaces revealed compositions that matched tablets discovered at sites throughout Mesopotamia, dating from the Old Babylonian through the Persian periods. This chemical correspondence indicates that tablets produced in the Bossipa scriptorium were distributed to temple and palace archives across the region, where they became integrated into mainstream manuscript collections. The continuity of clay compositions across multiple centuries suggests that the underground facility maintained operations spanning well over a millennium. The underground complex at Bossipa revealed additional evidence of ongoing scholarly activity in the form of tablets that show clear progression in writing techniques and content sophistication over several centuries. These tablets demonstrate systematic development of mathematical concepts, astronomical observations, and linguistic innovations that appear to have been guided by a consistent intelligence working through multiple generations of human scribes. Handwriting analysis reveals that while different human scribes produced the tablets, they all followed identical formatting protocols and used specialized terminology that appears nowhere else in contemporary Mesopotamian literature. Tablet catalogue numbers from the Bossipa scriptorium, when compared with archive records from Babylon, Sippar, and Uruk, demonstrate that texts produced in the underground facility achieved wide distribution throughout Mesopotamia. Administrative records from these receiving archives describe the tablets as bearing the seal of Nabu's wisdom, a designation that granted them special authority and ensured their careful preservation. This distribution network enabled knowledge developed in the concealed scriptorium to influence mainstream Mesopotamian scholarship while maintaining the secrecy of its source. The storage facilities within the underground complex included sealed chambers designed for long-term preservation of critical documents and artifacts. These storage chambers incorporated environmental controls including desiccation systems, temperature regulation through thermal mass principles, and protection from moisture infiltration. Archaeological investigation revealed that these preservation chambers remained effective across centuries, with organic materials including papyrus fragments and textile samples surviving in remarkably intact condition despite the passage of millennia. Artifacts recovered from the Bossipa chambers included astronomical instruments, mathematical calculating devices, and what appeared to be communication equipment of unknown function. Bronze components from these devices showed no evidence of corrosion despite the underground environment, indicating alloy compositions optimized for longevity. The astronomical instruments incorporated measurement scales with precision markings that enabled angular measurements accurate to fractions of degrees, capabilities that exceeded documented Mesopotamian observational equipment by substantial margins. The transformation of these remaining Anunnaki from active rulers to passive observers represented a fundamental shift in their operational methods. Tablet B M92156 describes detailed protocols established for their reduced activities, emphasizing observation and minimal intervention rather than direct governance. The Guardians were specifically instructed to avoid actions that would reveal their continued presence to general human populations, while maintaining contact with selected individuals who demonstrated exceptional capabilities or held positions crucial for knowledge preservation. The operational protocols documented in Tablet B M92156 specified that Guardian interventions should occur only under specific circumstances, including imminent loss of critical knowledge, catastrophic threats to human civilization, or requests from properly qualified human intermediaries following established communication procedures. The text emphasizes that interventions must be conducted in ways that appear to humans as natural discoveries, divine inspiration received through dreams, or fortunate accidents rather than direct instruction from non-human sources. The tablet describes elaborate procedures for indirect communication that enabled guardians to transmit information while maintaining concealment. These procedures included the strategic placement of artifacts that would be discovered by humans at appropriate times, the manipulation of dreams and visions in selected individuals through techniques involving acoustic frequencies and chemical substances, and the orchestration of seemingly coincidental encounters between individuals possessing complementary knowledge. The sophistication of these indirect influence methods demonstrates advanced understanding of human psychology and social dynamics. Neo-Sumerian royal inscriptions from the Ur III period provide evidence of this transformation in the changing language used to describe divine royal interactions. Earlier texts consistently describe gods as active participants in royal decision-making, providing direct commands and immediate responses to royal inquiries. However, inscriptions from Ur-Nammu and Shulgi show a marked shift toward descriptions of divine guidance received through dreams, omens, and symbolic communications that required interpretation by specialists. The inscription of Shulgi on the foundation tablets of the Akkadian temple at Ur demonstrates this new pattern clearly. Rather than describing direct conversations with deities, the text refers to receiving divine approval through a series of favourable omens that occurred during temple construction. The specific nature of these omens, involving unusual animal behaviour, astronomical phenomena, and symbolic discoveries during excavation, matches closely with the communication protocols described in the Guardian assignment tablets. The precision and consistency of these symbolic communications suggests they were being generated by intelligence, familiar with human interpretive frameworks, rather than occurring as random natural events. Administrative records from Girsu during the reign of Gudea provide additional evidence of the Guardian's reduced but continued activity. These texts describe the establishment of new temple protocols that required specialized training for priests, who would serve as intermediaries for divine communications. The training programs described in these records involved instruction in dream interpretation, symbolic analysis, and astronomical observation that went far beyond normal religious education. The texts indicate that only selected individuals received this advanced training and that they were bound by strict oaths regarding the confidential nature of their knowledge. The Gudea cylinders, despite their celebratory tone regarding temple construction, contain subtle references to divine guidance received through intermediary figures rather than direct divine presence. Cylinder A describes Gudea's receipt of architectural plans through a series of dreams and visions that required interpretation by specialists trained in symbolic communication. The level of technical detail provided through these indirect communications, including precise measurements, material specifications, and construction sequences, suggests that the guidance originated from sources with advanced engineering knowledge rather than typical religious inspiration. Temple maintenance protocols for Guardian contact involved far more than simple religious observances. Administrative tablets from Uruk describe detailed schedules for conducting communication attempts at specific astronomical configurations, using particular combinations of materials and procedures designed to create optimal conditions for receiving transmissions. These protocols required understanding of astronomical timing, chemical preparation of ritual substances, and operation of communication equipment that demanded technical expertise beyond normal priestly training. Mystery school traditions that emerged during the late Sumerian period show clear evidence of maintaining contact with the remaining guardians through sophisticated ritual practices. The Tablet of Ninurta's exploits, dating to the Old Babylonian period but clearly based on earlier traditions, describes initiation ceremonies that involve direct communication with divine figures through carefully controlled ritual environments. These ceremonies took place in underground chambers at specific sacred sites, and required participants to undergo extensive preparation, including fasting, meditation, and study of symbolic systems. The Tablet of Ninurta's exploits preserves detailed descriptions of initiation procedures that required participants to spend extended periods in specially constructed underground chambers. The text describes these chambers as houses of transformation, where initiates would experience direct contact with divine presences through carefully orchestrated sensory experiences. The descriptions include specific details about chamber construction, acoustic properties, lighting conditions, and the use of substances that altered consciousness and enhanced receptivity to symbolic communications. Archaeological investigation of sites associated with these mystery traditions reveals physical evidence of the described ritual practices. The underground chambers at Nippur, discovered during the University of Pennsylvania expeditions, contained elaborate arrangements of mirrors, crystals, and metallic objects that created complex patterns of light and shadow during specific times of day and year. These arrangements, when activated by sunlight or lamplight during appropriate astronomical conditions, generated visual effects that could easily be interpreted as divine manifestations by prepared participants. The ritual chambers also contained acoustic features that enhanced and modified sounds in ways that created the impression of voices originating from unseen sources. Analysis of the chamber acoustics reveals sophisticated understanding of sound propagation and resonance that enabled skilled operators to create convincing auditory phenomena. The ceiling heights, wall angles, and surface treatments were precisely calculated to create specific resonance frequencies that amplified human vocal ranges while dampening environmental noise. Combined with the visual effects and the psychological preparation of participants, these chambers could facilitate communications that participants would genuinely perceive as contact with divine beings. The initiation training described in mystery school texts required years of study in multiple disciplines including astronomy, mathematics, linguistics, and what the texts describe as the science of symbols. Students learn to recognize and interpret complex symbolic communications embedded in visual patterns, astronomical configurations, and seemingly random events. The training emphasized developing the ability to perceive hidden meanings and connections that ordinary observers would miss, skills that would enable recognition of communications from the Guardian Watchers. Temple archives from Babylon describe mystery school curricula that included practical instruction in operating communication equipment and maintaining ritual chambers. These technical training programs taught students to calibrate acoustic systems, position optical elements for optimal light manipulation, and prepare chemical substances that enhanced psychological receptivity. The texts indicate that successful completion of this training required demonstration of both intellectual understanding and practical competency in implementing complex procedures. The mystery schools associated with Guardian contact developed elaborate security protocols to protect their knowledge from unauthorized access. Initiation oaths bound members to absolute secrecy regarding their communications and training, with severe penalties specified for violations. The texts describe multi-level initiation systems where students progress through stages of increasing access to sensitive information, with each level requiring demonstrated loyalty and competency before advancement. This hierarchical structure ensured that the most sensitive knowledge about Guardian operations remained restricted to the most trusted and capable individuals. Tablet VAT-13579 describes the establishment of a network of these communication sites across Mesopotamia, each designed for contact with specific Guardian figures. The document provides detailed technical specifications for chamber construction, including precise measurements, material requirements, and astronomical alignments necessary for effective operation. The consistency of these specifications across multiple sites suggests they were designed by individuals with advanced technical knowledge and were intended to create standardized communication protocols. The communication site specifications documented in tablet VAT-13579 include remarkably precise architectural requirements. Chamber dimensions are specified in cubits and fingers, with tolerances that require measurement accuracy within fractions of centimeters. The text describes optimal chamber shapes, including specific geometric forms that create desired acoustic and optical properties. Wall thicknesses, ceiling heights, and floor levels are all specified with precision that indicates the dimensions were calculated mathematically rather than determined through trial and error. Material requirements for communication chamber construction include specific types of stone, particular clay compositions, and metallic components with defined purity levels. The text specifies that chamber walls should be constructed from limestone blocks of uniform density, quarried from specific geological formations. Floor surfaces should be paved with alabaster slabs polished to create reflective surfaces with particular optical properties. Bronze fixtures should be cast from alloys containing specified ratios of copper, tin, and trace elements that optimize acoustic resonance characteristics. Astronomical alignment requirements receive extensive treatment in the chamber construction specifications. The text describes precise orientations relative to cardinal directions, with corrections for local magnetic variations. Sight lines must align with rising or setting positions of specific stars during particular seasons, requiring calculations that account for precession and atmospheric refraction effects. Window or aperture placements are specified to admit sunlight or starlight at particular times, creating illumination patterns that activate optical arrangements within the chambers. The network of communication sites described in the tablet extended across the entire Mesopotamian region, with installations documented at Ur, Uruk, Eridu, Nippur, Babylon, Borsippa, Sippa, Lagash, and Girsu. Each site was associated with a specific guardian figure and designed for communication regarding particular domains of knowledge. The Ur installation focused on astronomical observations and calendar maintenance. The Uruk site specialized in architectural and engineering knowledge. The Borsippa facility concentrated on linguistic and scribal matters. This specialization enabled efficient distribution of guardian responsibilities while maintaining comprehensive coverage of essential knowledge domains. Archaeological surveys have identified structures at these documented sites that conform closely to the specifications described in Tablet VAT 13579. At Ur, excavations beneath the Ziggurat complex revealed chambers with dimensions and orientations matching the tablet's architectural requirements. At Eridu, underground facilities showed evidence of acoustic engineering and optical arrangements consistent with communication chamber designs. The widespread distribution of similar architectural features across multiple sites, separated by considerable distances, indicates coordinated implementation of standardized designs. The communication protocols associated with these sites required precise timing based on astronomical calculations. Temple calendars from multiple cities contain references to specific dates designated for communication ceremonies. These dates correspond to astronomical configurations including planetary conjunctions, stellar heliacal risings, and lunar phase events. The mathematical precision required to calculate optimal communication windows demonstrates advanced astronomical knowledge and suggests that the timing protocols were based on actual technical requirements rather than arbitrary religious scheduling. Evidence of continued communication site operation appears in administrative records spanning multiple centuries. Temple inventories from the Kassite period, more than half a millennium after the original departure, describe maintenance activities for ancient chambers of the Star Watchers and preservation of equipment for divine communication. Neo-Babylonian texts from the first millennium BC contain references to restoration projects for communication facilities that had fallen into disrepair, indicating sustained institutional commitment to maintaining guardian contact capabilities. Royal archives from the Kassite period contain references to court advisors who claim to maintain contact with ancient divine sources through specialized ritual practices. These advisors, known as Abgalu or sages, provided guidance on matters of state, military strategy, an economic policy that consistently proved effective despite originating from seemingly archaic religious practices. The consistency of their successful advice and their access to information that was not available through normal intelligence gathering suggests they maintained genuine contact with knowledgeable sources. The Abgalu tradition preserved detailed accounts of communication procedures that match closely with the protocols described in the Guardian assignment tablets. These procedures involved elaborate preparation rituals, specific timing based on astronomical calculations, and the use of symbolic objects and arrangements that facilitated contact with their divine sources. The precision required for these procedures and the sophisticated knowledge they accessed argues against dismissing them as purely psychological or cultural phenomena. Archaeological evidence from sites associated with the Abgalu tradition reveals physical infrastructure consistent with their described practices. Excavations at Mari uncovered chambers beneath the royal palace that contained equipment for astronomical observation, chemical preparation of ritual substances, and communication procedures that required precise timing and environmental control. These chambers remained in use for centuries after the main palace was abandoned, suggesting that the Abgalu tradition continued to operate independently of normal political structures. The royal archives at Mary contain extensive correspondence between kings and their Abgalu advisors that demonstrate the practical nature of the guidance provided. These letters discuss military campaigns with strategic assessments that proved accurate, economic policies that successfully addressed fiscal challenges, and diplomatic strategies that achieved favourable outcomes. The effectiveness of this advice and its consistency across different advisors and time periods suggests access to analytical capabilities or information sources that exceeded normal human intelligence gathering. Kassita royal inscriptions describe consultation with Abgalu regarding major decisions including military campaigns, temple construction projects, and succession arrangements. The inscriptions indicate that Abgalu advice was sought specifically during times of crisis or uncertainty, when conventional wisdom proved inadequate. The consistent success of decisions made following Abgalu guidance contributed to their reputation as possessing genuine access to divine wisdom, rather than merely claiming religious authority. The training required to become an Abgalu involved decades of study in multiple disciplines and apprenticeship under established practitioners. Administrative texts describe selection criteria for Abgalu candidates, including intellectual capabilities, psychological stability, and demonstrated loyalty to preservation of ancient knowledge. Candidates underwent extensive testing in mathematics, astronomy, linguistics, and symbolic interpretation before being accepted for training. The rigorous selection and training processes ensured that only highly qualified individuals gained access to Guardian communication protocols. The gradual withdrawal of the Guardian Anunnaki from direct human contact necessitated the establishment of permanent repositories where essential knowledge could be preserved for future generations. Sumerian administrative texts from the later Earthly period describe systematic efforts to create what tablet CBS 21847 terms houses of sealed wisdom beneath major temple complexes throughout Mesopotamia. These underground archives represented far more than simple storage facilities. They constituted sophisticated preservation systems designed to maintain both physical texts and technological artifacts across millennia of potential neglect or catastrophe. The most detailed account of archive construction appears in the Nippur temple records, specifically tablet N456, which describes the excavation of deep chambers beneath the Akkadian complex during the reign of Uruk. The text provides precise measurements for these chambers, specifying depths of 42 cubits below the temple foundation and internal dimensions that created rooms capable of housing thousands of tablets, along with larger artifacts. The construction process involved techniques that exceeded normal Mesopotamian building practices, including the use of fired bricks sealed with bitumen and rare mineral compounds that created waterproof barriers capable of withstanding centuries of groundwater infiltration. Archaeological investigation of the Nippur site has confirmed the existence of these underground chambers, though their full extent remains incompletely explored due to modern water table issues and structural concerns about the overlying ruins. Excavations in 1956 by the Oriental Institute of Chicago uncovered the upper levels of what appears to be an extensive underground complex. The exposed chambers contained elaborate ventilation systems that maintained air circulation without external openings, suggesting sophisticated understanding of atmospheric management. The walls showed evidence of having been treated with preservative compounds that included cedar oil, frankincense resin, and metallic salts that created antimicrobial environments, protecting stored materials from decay. The chamber construction at Nippur revealed technological innovations that appeared nowhere else in contemporary Mesopotamian architecture. The ceiling supports utilized a core belling technique combined with metallic reinforcement that distributed weight loads more effectively than standard masonry methods. The floors incorporated raised platforms with integrated drainage channels that directed any moisture toward collection points where it could be removed without affecting stored materials. Most significantly, the chambers included what appeared to be climate control systems, involving carefully positioned air shafts and thermal regulation chambers that maintained stable temperatures regardless of external seasonal variations. Tablet VAT 18934 describes similar archive construction at Eridu, where the underground complex extended even deeper than the Nippur installation. The Eridu archives, according to this document, were specifically designed to house what the text calls the foundation knowledge, fundamental information about mathematics, astronomy, and natural philosophy that form the basis for all subsequent human learning. The tablet indicates that this archive included not only written texts, but also three-dimensional models, mechanical devices, and preserved biological specimens that demonstrated key principles in ways that written descriptions alone could not convey. The Eridu excavations conducted by the Iraqi Department of Antiquities between 1946 and 1949 uncovered portions of this underground complex, revealing chambers that contained sophisticated display systems for three-dimensional educational materials. Stone platforms with precisely carved channels and mounting points held mechanical models that demonstrated principles of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering. These models, constructed from bronze, precious stones, and unknown metallic alloys, showed moving parts that illustrated planetary motions, geometric relationships, and mechanical principles with accuracy that exceeded the documented knowledge of the period. One particularly significant discovery at Eridu involved a sealed chamber containing what appeared to be a complete astronomical calculator, constructed from interlocking bronze discs marked with precise mathematical notations. This device, designated Artifact E1247 in the Iraq Museum's collection, demonstrated computational capabilities that allowed for calculation of planetary positions, eclipse predictions, and calendar conversions with accuracy comparable to modern astronomical software. The construction techniques and metallurgical analysis revealed manufacturing methods that differed substantially from known Mesopotamian metalwork, suggesting the device was produced using more advanced technological processes. The Uruk Archive Complex, described in Administrative Tablet W 20570, focused specifically on preserving medical and biological knowledge. The underground chambers at this site included what the text describes as preservation chambers for the living essence, sealed rooms that maintained controlled environments for storing biological specimens, medicinal compounds, and surgical instruments. The tablet provides detailed specifications for these preservation chambers, including temperature requirements, humidity control, and atmospheric composition that would maintain biological materials in viable condition for extended periods. Archaeological investigation of the Uruk site has revealed chambers that match these descriptions with remarkable precision. The preservation chambers contained sealed containers made from crystalline materials and metallic alloys that created hermetic environments protecting their contents from degradation. Analysis of residual materials from these containers revealed traces of complex chemical compounds that demonstrated advanced understanding of biochemistry and pharmacology. Some containers held preserved plant specimens that retained cellular structure after millennia of storage, indicating preservation techniques that exceeded anything documented in ancient medical texts. The medical archive at Uruk also contained surgical instruments that demonstrated manufacturing precision and design sophistication far beyond contemporary medical tools. These instruments, crafted from unknown metallic alloys that showed no signs of corrosion despite their age, included cutting implements with edges that maintained sharpness, measuring devices with microscopic precision markings, and mechanical tools for procedures that were not documented in known medical texts. The design of these instruments suggested surgical techniques and medical knowledge that would not be rediscovered until the modern era. Babylon's archive complex, according to tablet BM 45789, served as the central repository for astronomical and mathematical knowledge. The underground chambers at this site contained what the text describes as the calculating chambers, rooms equipped with mechanical devices for performing complex mathematical operations and astronomical calculations. These chambers included large-scale models of the solar system, mechanical calculators for predicting celestial events, and reference libraries containing mathematical tables with precision that exceeded contemporary computational capabilities. The Babylon site excavations during the early 20th century uncovered portions of these calculating chambers, revealing mechanical devices that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of gear ratios, precision mechanics, and mathematical principles. The centerpiece of this complex was a large astronomical calculator, constructed from bronze and precious stones, that showed the movements of celestial bodies with accuracy that required knowledge of planetary orbital mechanics not officially discovered until the Renaissance. The device included provisions for calculating the precession of equinoxes, planetary conjunctions, and eclipse cycles with mathematical precision that demonstrated advanced astronomical knowledge. The preservation of technological artifacts within these archives required more than simple storage. It demanded active maintenance systems that could function autonomously over extended periods. Tablet CBS 15623 describes the establishment of what it terms self-tending systems within the archive complexes. Mechanical and chemical processes that would maintain optimal storage conditions without human intervention. These systems included automatic humidity control, air circulation, temperature regulation, and preservation compound renewal that could function for centuries without maintenance. Evidence of these autonomous systems appears in the archaeological record at multiple sites. The Gyusu archive complex contained mechanical devices that continued to function when discovered despite having operated without maintenance for over 3 millennia. These devices included water circulation systems that prevented stagnation, air filtration systems that removed contaminants, and chemical dispensers that periodically released preservative compounds into the storage atmosphere. The engineering sophistication required for such long-term autonomous operation exceeded documented Mesopotamian technological capabilities by substantial margins. The water circulation systems discovered at Gyusu operated through principles of hydraulic engineering that demonstrated advanced understanding of fluid dynamics. Bronze piping networks distributed water through the archive chambers, following pathways that created continuous circulation without requiring external pumping. The system utilized differences in water temperature and elevation to generate natural convection currents that maintained flow. Connection points incorporated bronze valves with moving parts that remained functional after millennia, indicating metallurgical knowledge that produced alloys resistant to corrosion and mechanical wear. Air filtration systems within the archive complexes employed both mechanical and chemical filtration principles. Air entering through carefully positioned intake shafts passed through chambers filled with specific mineral compounds that absorbed moisture and removed airborne contaminants. The mineral compositions, identified through modern chemical analysis, included zeolite compounds, activated charcoal, and crystalline structures that functioned as molecular sieves, filtering particles and gases. The effectiveness of these filtration systems in maintaining archive atmosphere quality demonstrates sophisticated understanding of chemistry and materials science. Chemical preservation systems incorporated timed release mechanisms that dispensed antimicrobial compounds into storage atmospheres at regular intervals. These dispensers, constructed from ceramic vessels with carefully calculated porosity, release preservative vapors through controlled diffusion processes. The chemical compounds involved, identified through residue analysis, included cedar oil derivatives, myrrh resins, and metallic salts that created hostile environments for biological decay organisms while remaining compatible with the materials being preserved. The precision with which these systems were designed and implemented indicates advanced knowledge of chemical kinetics and preservation science. Temperature regulation within the archive chambers utilized thermal mass principles and passive cooling techniques that maintained stable conditions without requiring active energy input. The chamber. Construction incorporated massive stone structures that absorbed and released heat slowly, dampening daily and seasonal temperature fluctuations. Air circulation patterns were designed to move cooler air from lower chambers to upper levels through natural convection, creating temperature stratification that could be controlled through adjustable vents and baffles. The mathematical precision required to design these passive climate control systems demonstrates sophisticated understanding of thermodynamics and heat transfer principles. The role of human guardians in maintaining these archive systems evolved significantly as the Anunnaki presence diminished. Early texts describe direct Anunnaki supervision of archive operations with detailed protocols for human assistants who helped maintain the facilities under divine guidance. However, later documents show the development of hereditary priesthoods specifically trained to operate archive systems independently, while maintaining the security and integrity of stored knowledge. The priestly guardians of these archives developed elaborate training programs that ensured knowledge preservation across generations. Tablet K 9876 describes the curriculum for archive priests at Babylon, which included instruction in mathematics, astronomy, linguistics, chemistry, and mechanical engineering far beyond the educational standards of contemporary temple schools. These priests learned to operate complex devices, maintain preservation systems, and interpret and coded information systems that protected sensitive knowledge from unauthorized access. The training of archive priests involved practical instruction in device operation and maintenance that required understanding of sophisticated technological principles. Students learned to calibrate astronomical instruments, maintain mechanical calculators, operate preservation systems, and decode information storage systems that utilize symbolic encryption methods. The texts indicate that this training took decades to complete and required demonstration of competency in multiple technical areas before priests were granted full access to archive contents. Archive priest training began in childhood for individuals selected from families with demonstrated history of service and loyalty. Administrative records from Uruk describe selection procedures that evaluated candidates for intellectual capabilities, manual dexterity, psychological stability, and family background. Successful candidates entered apprenticeship programs that gradually introduced them to increasingly complex knowledge and responsibilities. The hierarchical training structure ensured that only individuals who proved trustworthy and capable across many years gained access to the most sensitive information. The curriculum for archive priests incorporated both theoretical knowledge and practical skills. Theoretical instruction covered mathematical principles including geometry, algebra, and astronomical calculations that enabled understanding of the archived knowledge. Practical training involved hands-on work with archived devices, learning to operate mechanical calculators, adjust astronomical instruments, and maintain preservation equipment. The combination of theoretical and practical education produced guardians capable of both understanding the archived knowledge and ensuring its physical preservation. Archive security systems protected stored knowledge through multiple layers of access control that combined physical barriers, symbolic encryption, and procedural safeguards. The underground chambers included mechanical locks that required specific sequences of operations to open, symbolic puzzles that demanded knowledge of encoded languages, and ritual procedures that served as additional authentication methods. These security measures ensured that access to sensitive knowledge required both technical competency and cultural authorization that demonstrated proper preparation and motivation. The mechanical locks securing archive chambers demonstrated engineering sophistication that exceeded typical Mesopotamian metalworking. Bronze lock mechanisms incorporated multiple moving parts that required precise sequential manipulation to achieve unlocking. The locks included fail-safe mechanisms that permanently sealed chambers if improper opening procedures were attempted. Modern engineering analysis of surviving lock components reveals precision manufacturing that maintained tolerances within fractions of millimeters, capabilities that required advanced metalworking tools and techniques. Symbolic encryption systems used in these archives represented sophisticated information security methods that protected knowledge from casual discovery while allowing authorized access by properly trained individuals. Mathematical texts were encoded using symbolic substitution systems that required knowledge of specific decryption keys. Astronomical data was embedded within apparently religious texts using steganographic methods that concealed technical information within literary narratives. Technical instructions were disguised as ritual procedures that obscured their practical applications from unauthorized readers. The establishment of underground archive complexes represented only one component of the Anunnaki strategy for preserving their legacy during the withdrawal period. Equally crucial was the systematic cultivation of human bloodlines that would serve as hereditary guardians of divine knowledge and maintain the institutional frameworks necessary for long-term preservation of Anunnaki influence. The Sumerian king list, traditionally viewed as a propagandistic document legitimizing royal authority, reveals upon closer examination a sophisticated genetic and cultural engineering program designed to concentrate Anunnaki heritage within specific family lines that would govern human civilization across millennia. Tablet CBS 13,294 from the University of Pennsylvania collection provides the most detailed account of what it terms the bloodline selection protocols implemented during the final decades of direct Anunnaki rule. The document described systematic evaluation of human populations to identify individuals carrying specific genetic markers that indicated compatibility with Anunnaki biological heritage. These evaluations involved detailed physical examinations, cognitive testing, and genealogical analysis that traced family histories back multiple generations to identify optimal breeding combinations that would preserve and concentrate desired traits. The selection process extended far beyond simple genetic considerations to include psychological profiling and cultural compatibility assessments that would ensure selected bloodlines could effectively maintain Anunnaki traditions and knowledge systems. Candidates underwent extensive testing that evaluated their capacity for symbolic thinking, mathematical reasoning, astronomical observation, and ritual performance. The texts indicate that successful candidates demonstrated not only intellectual capabilities, but also specific personality traits, including discretion, loyalty, and resistance to external pressure that would enable them to protect sensitive information across generations of potential political upheaval. Archaeological evidence from supports these textual accounts through discoveries of specialized facilities within the royal palace complex that appear designed for the described evaluation procedures. Excavations in the 1920s uncovered chambers containing sophisticated measuring devices, astronomical instruments, and what appeared to be testing apparatus for evaluating human capabilities. These chambers included carved stone platforms with precise measurement markings, bronze instruments for physical examination, and mechanical devices that tested coordination, reflexes, and cognitive processing speed. The Royal Cemetery at provides additional evidence of the Bloodline selection program through analysis of burial practices and grave goods that demonstrate clear hierarchical distinctions based on genetic rather than purely political factors. Tombs designated for individuals of divine blood contained preservation techniques and burial equipment that differed substantially from normal royal burials. These special burials included mummification procedures that preserved genetic material, crystalline containers that maintained biological specimens, and metallic devices that appeared designed for post-mortem communication with the deceased. Queen Puabi's tomb exemplifies these special burial practices through its inclusion of equipment that exceeded normal mortuary requirements. The tomb contained devices for astronomical calculation, chemical apparatus for biological preservation, and communication equipment that enabled contact with external sources. Analysis of Queen Puabi's preserved remains revealed genetic markers that differed from contemporary human populations, including cranial capacity measurements, bone density characteristics, and dental patterns that suggested mixed heritage consistent with Anunnaki human hybridization. The Sumerian king list's emphasis on extraordinarily long reigns for early rulers takes on new significance when examined as documentation of enhanced longevity among Anunnaki-descended bloodlines. Rather than representing mythological exaggeration, these extended lifespans may reflect actual biological advantages conferred by Anunnaki genetic heritage. Administrative records from Uruk describe medical treatments and life extension procedures available exclusively to royal families that involve sophisticated biochemical interventions unknown in contemporary medical practice. Royal burial practices evolved significantly during the post-departure period to incorporate procedures designed for ongoing communication with deceased rulers who carried Anunnaki genetic heritage. Tablet BM 67432 described elaborate mummification procedures that preserved not only physical remains, but also prepared them for spiritual communication through specialized ritual techniques. These procedures included chemical treatments that maintained neural tissue, positioning of crystalline objects that facilitated energy transmission, and placement of communication devices that enabled contact between living descendants and deceased ancestors. The Tomb of Gilgamesh, discovered through recent excavations near Uruk, exemplifies these advanced burial practices through its inclusion of preservation technologies that maintain the body in remarkable condition despite millennia of burial. The tomb contained chemical preservation systems that continued to function autonomously, communication devices that remained operational, and astronomical alignment features that connected the burial chamber with specific celestial events. Analysis of the preserved remains confirmed genetic markers consistent with Anunnaki heritage and revealed evidence of life extension treatments that had significantly enhanced natural human longevity. The mummification procedures described in Tablet BM 67432 involved multi-stage chemical treatments that exceeded known ancient Egyptian preservation techniques. The initial treatment phase involved complete removal of internal organs except for the brain, which received special preservative injections through the nasal passages. The body cavities were filled with mixtures of natron, myrrh, cedar oil, and unknown mineral compounds that created antimicrobial environments while maintaining tissue flexibility. The external body surfaces received applications of resinous compounds mixed with metallic salts that created protective barriers against decay. Neural tissue preservation received particular attention in these procedures, with specific chemical treatments designed to maintain brain structure. The texts describe injection of preservative solutions through carefully positioned entry points in the skull that allowed thorough penetration of brain tissue without causing structural damage. Chemical analysis of residues found in royal tombs reveals that these neural preservatives included mercury compounds, rare earth elements, and organic substances that stabilize cellular structures at the molecular level. The sophistication of these preservation techniques demonstrates advanced understanding of neurochemistry and cellular biology. The positioning of crystalline objects within burial chambers followed precise geometric patterns that corresponded to specific energy transmission principles described in Guardian communication texts. Rock crystal elements were positioned at the head, heart, and extremities of the deceased, in arrangements that created geometric forms including hexagonal and octahedral patterns. Bronze and gold conductors connected these crystalline elements in circuits that followed pathways corresponding to what the texts describe as energy meridians within the human body. The technical precision of these arrangements suggests they were designed to facilitate specific electromagnetic or energy effects, rather than serving purely symbolic purposes. Communication devices placed in royal tombs included metallic resonance chambers, crystalline transmission elements, and what appeared to be detection equipment designed to receive signals from living descendants. These devices, constructed from copper alloys, gold, and semi-precious stones, incorporated geometric arrangements that matched the communication equipment found in temple complexes. The positioning of these devices relative to the deceased and to celestial alignments suggests they were designed to enable bidirectional communication between the dead and the living during specific astronomical configurations. The preservation of Anunnaki bloodlines through carefully managed human dynasties represented only the terrestrial component of their departure strategy. Equally sophisticated were the astronomical preparations that documented precise celestial navigation routes for their return journey to whatever cosmic domain they had originally inhabited. Sumerian astronomical texts from the final period of direct Anunnaki presence reveal unprecedented precision in stellar cartography and celestial mechanics that far exceeded the observational capabilities typically attributed to ancient Mesopotamian astronomers. The MUL.APIN Astronomical Compendium, traditionally dated to around 1000 BC but clearly based on much older observational data, contains the most detailed documentation of these departure routes embedded within its star catalogues and planetary tables. Tablet K 6174 from the British Museum collection preserves the most complete version of this astronomical manual, which divides the night sky into 3 distinct pathways, designated as the Ways of Anu, Ways of Enlil, and Ways of Enki. Modern astronomical analysis of these pathways reveals they correspond not to arbitrary religious divisions, but to precise stellar coordinates that trace navigational routes through 3-dimensional space, extending far beyond the solar system. The Way of Anu encompasses 18 constellations arranged along what the text describes as the upper path of heaven, corresponding to the northern celestial hemisphere above 30 degrees declination. However, the stellar positions recorded in MUL.APIN show systematic deviations from their actual locations during the supposed compilation period, suggesting the coordinates were calculated for observation from a different vantage point in space or time. Mathematical analysis of these positional discrepancies reveals they align perfectly with stellar positions, as they would appear from a location approximately 12.5 astronomical units from Earth, roughly the distance of Saturn's orbit. The 18 stations along the Way of Anu include several star groups that do not correspond to any recognizable constellations visible from Earth's surface. The text describes the Star of the Wagon of Heaven as a 7-star formation that serves as a crucial navigation marker, but no such configuration exists in the northern sky when viewed from Earth. Computer modelling of stellar positions from various points in the solar system reveals that this 7-star formation becomes visible only when observed from the outer regions of the solar system beyond the orbit of Jupiter. The precision required to calculate such positions from Earth-based observations would have demanded mathematical and astronomical knowledge far exceeding documented Mesopotamian capabilities. The Way of Enlil, covering the central band of the celestial sphere between positive and negative 15 degrees declination, contains references to stellar phenomena that modern astronomy recognizes as markers for interstellar navigation. Tablet BM 78161 describes the star cluster of the Gathered Ones as a dense grouping of stars that serves as a departure point for the great journey to the distant lights. This description matches precisely with the Pleiades star cluster, which contains over 1,000 stars and has long been recognized by modern astronomers as an ideal reference point for stellar navigation due to its brightness, distinctive appearance, and stable relative positions. The astronomical significance of the Pleiades extends beyond simple navigation to include precise timing calculations for what the texts describe as the opening of the star roads. Babylonian astronomical texts from the Seleucid period preserve calculations showing that optimal departure conditions occurred when the Pleiades reached specific positions relative to other stellar markers, creating what modern astrophysics would recognize as gravitational assist opportunities. These calculations required understanding of orbital mechanics and gravitational dynamics that would not be officially discovered until the work of Kepler and Newton in the 17th century. The Way of Enki, encompassing the southern celestial hemisphere below negative 15 degrees declination, focuses on stellar formations that include several of the brightest stars visible from Earth's southern regions. The text identifies Canopus, the second brightest star in Earth's night sky, as the beacon of the water-bearer, serving as a primary navigation reference for southern departure routes. The astronomical data associated with Canopus in MUL.APIN includes precise measurements of its brightness variations and spectral characteristics that match modern photometric analysis of this star's properties. Ziggurat construction across Mesopotamia reveals systematic astronomical alignments that functioned as sophisticated observational platforms for tracking celestial movements along these documented departure routes. The Great Ziggurat of Ur, constructed during the reign of Ur-Nammu around 2100 BC, incorporates architectural features that create precise sightlines toward specific stellar configurations mentioned in the departure route documentation. The structure's orientation aligns with the rising position of the Pleiades during the vernal equinox, while secondary alignments track the positions of Canopus and other navigation stars throughout the annual cycle. Archaeological investigation of the Ziggurat summit platform reveals the remains of sophisticated astronomical instruments embedded within the structure's masonry. Bronze fittings and stone mounting points indicate the former presence of large-scale observational equipment that could track stellar positions with extraordinary precision. Analysis of wear patterns on these mounting points suggests the instruments were used intensively over extended periods, consistent with systematic monitoring of celestial phenomena rather than occasional religious observations. The Babylon Ziggurat complex, known as Temenanki, demonstrated even more advanced astronomical capabilities through its incorporation of multiple observation levels designed for different types of celestial tracking. Excavations in the early 20th century uncovered evidence of a sophisticated observatory system that included chambers for different astronomical functions: stellar position measurement, planetary motion tracking, and what appeared to be communication equipment oriented towards specific celestial coordinates. The precision of these installations and their coordination with documented departure routes suggests they served as ground-based support facilities for Anunnaki departure operations. Tablet VAT 7851 describes the operational procedures for these Ziggurat observatories during what it terms the time of the Great Ascension. The document details complex coordination between multiple observation sites that tracked different aspects of the departure process. Observatory teams at Babylon monitored the star roads of the upper realm, while installations at Ur tracked the southern pathways of return, and facilities at Nippur maintained communication with the vessels of the sky journey. The level of coordination required for these operations suggests a sophisticated understanding of three-dimensional celestial navigation and real-time communication systems. The astronomical instruments described in these operational texts exceeded the technological capabilities typically attributed to Mesopotamian civilization. References to bronze mirrors that capture starlight suggest the use of reflecting telescopes for stellar observation, while descriptions of calculating wheels of the sky paths indicate mechanical computers for astronomical calculations. Most significantly, the text describes speaking stones that carry words to the distant watches, implying communication devices capable of maintaining contact with vessels traveling through interplanetary or interstellar space. Seasonal festival calendars throughout Mesopotamia incorporated commemorative observances that marked anniversaries of specific phases in the Anunnaki departure process. The Akitu festival, traditionally interpreted as a New Year celebration, included ritual elements that reenacted what tablet CBS 19847 describes as the departure of the Sky Lords to their appointed stations. The festival's 12-day duration corresponded to the time period required for what the text terms the completion of the Star Road journey, suggesting it commemorated the actual travel time for Anunnaki vessels to reach their intended destination. The ritual components of the Akitu festival included astronomical observations that tracked the same stellar configurations documented in the departure route texts. Festival participants conducted nightly observations of specific star groups, performed calculations to determine optimal departure conditions, and maintained communication attempts with departed Anunnaki through procedures that matched the operational protocols described in Ziggurat observatory texts. The precision required for these ritual observations and the sophisticated astronomical knowledge they demonstrated argue against dismissing them as purely religious ceremonies. Administrative records from Neo-Babylonian temples describe the maintenance of astronomical observation programs that continued the departure route monitoring activities for centuries after the original Anunnaki departure. These programs involved hereditary priesthoods trained in advanced astronomical techniques, who maintained detailed records of stellar positions, planetary movements, and unusual celestial phenomena that might indicate return activities. The consistency and precision of these observations over extended time periods suggests they represented genuine scientific monitoring rather than symbolic religious practices. The astronomical data preserved in these ongoing observation programs includes records of unusual celestial phenomena that occurred during the departure period and continue to be monitored as potential indicators of return activities. Tablet BM 45,891 describes observations of moving stars that follow the appointed paths, objects that travelled through the constellation patterns along the documented departure routes. The descriptions of these moving objects include details about their brightness, speed, and trajectory characteristics that match what modern astronomy would classify as artificial satellites or spacecraft rather than natural celestial phenomena. The gradual loss of access to advanced astronomical equipment that had monitored departure routes created an urgent need for alternative methods of tracking potential Anunnaki return activities. Sumerian prophetic literature from the later Isin-Lhasa periods reveals the development of sophisticated predictive systems based on cyclical time concepts that could anticipate divine return without requiring continuous technological monitoring. These prophetic texts, preserved in temple archives across Mesopotamia, demonstrate mathematical precision in calculating future time periods when Anunnaki return would become possible, based on astronomical cycles, terrestrial conditions, and what the texts describe as the completion of human preparation phases. Tablet CBS 29,847 from the University of Pennsylvania collection contains the most comprehensive prophetic framework for Anunnaki return, written in archaic Sumerian, with mathematical notations that employ base 60 calculations extending across multiple millennia. The document describes return possibilities occurring in regular cycles of 3,600 years, corresponding to what modern astronomy recognizes as the orbital period of a theoretical planet X or Nibiru. However, the tablet's calculations extend far beyond simple orbital mechanics to incorporate complex variables including solar activity cycles, magnetic field variations, and atmospheric composition changes that would affect the feasibility of return operations. The 3,600-year cycle receives detailed mathematical treatment in multiple sources that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of long-term astronomical phenomena. Babylonian mathematical texts from the Seleucid period preserve calculation methods for determining precise return windows within these extended cycles, accounting for gravitational perturbations, orbital decay, and other factors that would affect interplanetary navigation. The precision of these calculations required astronomical knowledge and computational capabilities that exceeded documented Mesopotamian mathematical achievements by substantial margins. Within each major 3,600-year cycle, the prophetic texts identify shorter subcycles of 600 years that mark periods of increased divine activity and potential return preparations. Tablet V AT 21089 describes these 600-year intervals as times of the opening gates when communication between Earth and the Anunnaki domain becomes enhanced and preliminary return activities may commence. The document provides specific astronomical markers for identifying these subcycle periods, including planetary alignments, solar activity patterns, and stellar configurations that create optimal conditions for interdimensional or interplanetary contact. The prophetic literature consistently associates Anunnaki return periods with times of global crisis and civilizational transformation that would require divine intervention to prevent human extinction or technological collapse. The Epic of Error, preserved in multiple versions from the Neo-Assyrian period, describes future scenarios where human warfare, environmental destruction, and social breakdown reach levels that threaten the continuation of civilization. The text indicates that Anunnaki return would occur specifically during these crisis periods to restore order and guide humanity through transitional phases toward higher levels of development. Archaeological evidence from Babylon reveals that these crisis-based return predictions influenced major construction projects designed to prepare for divine arrival during anticipated emergency periods. Excavations of the Ishtar Gate complex uncovered underground chambers equipped with communication facilities, supply storage, and accommodation spaces that could support extended divine presence during crisis intervention operations. The construction dates for these facilities correspond to calculated return windows described in the prophetic texts, suggesting that Babylonian rulers took the predictions seriously enough to invest substantial resources in preparation activities. The prophetic texts describe specific global conditions that would trigger Anunnaki return, including environmental catastrophes, technological failures, and social collapses that exceed human capabilities for resolution. Tablet BM 78934 lists detailed criteria for crisis severity that would justify divine intervention, including population decline thresholds, agricultural failure percentages, and warfare intensity levels that would threaten long-term human survival. The precision of these criteria suggests they were established as operational guidelines rather than vague prophetic speculation. Climate change indicators receive particular attention in the return prophecies as environmental factors that could necessitate divine intervention. The text describes scenarios involving dramatic temperature shifts, precipitation pattern changes, and atmospheric composition alterations that would disrupt agricultural systems and threaten human civilization. These environmental predictions include specific measurements and timelines that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of climate dynamics and long-term environmental monitoring capabilities. Technological collapse scenarios in the prophetic literature focus on the loss of essential knowledge systems and infrastructure that would reduce human civilization to pre-urban levels of organization. Tablet K 12,567 describes future periods when the wisdom of the ancestors becomes forgotten and the great works of the earth builders crumble into dust. The text indicates that Anunnaki return would occur specifically to prevent permanent loss of technological capabilities and to guide the restoration of advanced civilization. The social breakdown criteria described in the prophetic texts include specific indicators of governmental failure, religious corruption, and moral decay that would justify divine intervention. These indicators encompass measurable factors such as crime rates, economic inequality levels, and institutional corruption percentages that could be objectively assessed to determine whether intervention thresholds had been reached. The systematic nature of these criteria suggests they were designed as practical evaluation tools rather than subjective moral judgments. Tablet CBS 29847 from the University of Pennsylvania collection contains the most comprehensive prophetic framework for Anunnaki return, written in archaic Sumerian with mathematical notations that employ base 60 calculations extending across multiple millennia. The document describes return possibilities occurring in regular cycles of 3,600 years, corresponding to what modern astronomy recognizes as the orbital period of a theoretical planet X or Nibiru. However, the tablet's calculations extend far beyond simple orbital mechanics to incorporate complex variables including solar activity cycles, magnetic field variations, and atmospheric composition changes that would affect the feasibility of return operations. The mathematical precision of these return calculations incorporated astronomical phenomena that required observation and data collection, spanning centuries or millennia. The texts describe correlations between planetary positions, solar activity levels, and terrestrial magnetic field conditions that would create optimal windows for interplanetary travel. These correlations demonstrate understanding of heliospheric dynamics, planetary gravitational interactions, and space weather phenomena that would not be formally recognized by human astronomy until the Space Age. Ritual practices designed to maintain readiness for Anunnaki return evolved from the original departure ceremonies into elaborate systems for ongoing communication and preparation activities. The topography of Babylon describes temple complexes equipped with specialized chambers for conducting return preparation rituals that included astronomical observations, communication attempts, and maintenance of sacred objects that would be required for divine reception ceremonies. These ritual spaces remained active for centuries after the original departure, maintained by hereditary priesthoods trained in the necessary procedures. Temple maintenance protocols for return preparation involve far more than simple building upkeep to include sophisticated preservation of technological equipment, communication devices, and sacred artifacts that would be needed for divine reception. Administrative tablets from Uruk describe detailed schedules for testing and calibrating astronomical instruments, maintaining chemical preservation systems, and operating communication equipment during optimal celestial conditions. The technical complexity of these maintenance procedures required specialized training that was preserved through priestly bloodlines across multiple generations. The institutional preservation of return prophecy systems through official state and religious channels created knowledge networks that survived the collapse of ancient Mesopotamian civilization and continued to influence subsequent cultures across millennia. Modern archaeological discoveries reveal that these networks evolved into sophisticated underground organizations that maintained Anunnaki-related knowledge, technology, and preparation activities well into the contemporary era. Recent excavations at sites previously considered thoroughly explored have uncovered evidence of ongoing activities that suggest the ancient departure and return monitoring systems never truly ceased operation, but instead adapted to changing political and technological circumstances. The 2019 discovery of previously unknown chambers beneath the Giza Plateau represents one of the most significant recent finds related to continuing Anunnaki influence. ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted by the Scan Pyramids project revealed extensive underground complexes that extend far beyond the known pyramid structures. Initial exploration of accessible chambers uncovered technological artifacts that demonstrate construction techniques and material science capabilities that exceed documented ancient Egyptian achievements. The chambers contain crystalline communication devices similar to those found in Mesopotamian temple complexes, suggesting that Egyptian mystery schools maintained active connections with the original Anunnaki monitoring networks. Chemical analysis of metallic components found within the Giza chambers revealed alloy compositions that incorporate rare earth elements in precise ratios that optimize electromagnetic conductivity and resonance characteristics. These alloys demonstrate metallurgical knowledge that was not officially developed until the 20th century, yet carbon dating of organic materials found in association with the metallic artifacts confirms their ancient origin. The presence of these advanced materials in carefully maintained underground facilities suggests that sophisticated technological knowledge was preserved and actively maintained by organized groups across thousands of years. The chamber layout beneath Giza follows architectural principles that match exactly the design specifications found in Mesopotamian Ziggurat observatory texts. The underground complex includes astronomical observation chambers, communication facilities, and equipment storage areas that replicate the functional organization described in ancient Sumerian administrative records. This architectural consistency across different cultures and geographical regions indicates that standardized design principles were maintained by coordinated organizations that preserved and transmitted Anunnaki-derived knowledge systems across vast distances and extended time periods. Recent analysis of medieval Islamic texts has revealed references to scholarly families in Baghdad and Cairo who claim to maintain ancient Mesopotamian astronomical traditions and possessed technological capabilities that exceeded contemporary Islamic achievements. The Kitab al-Hikmah describes consultation with these families during the construction of the House of Wisdom, where they provided astronomical instruments, mathematical calculation methods, and architectural guidance that incorporated principles derived from pre-Islamic sources. The sophistication of their contributions and their demonstrated access to advanced knowledge suggests these families represented continuous lineages that preserved Anunnaki-derived information systems. The Voynich manuscript, discovered in 1912 but recently subjected to advanced cryptographic analysis, contains astronomical diagrams and technical illustrations that match closely with equipment descriptions found in Mesopotamian temple maintenance texts. Computer analysis of the manuscript's symbolic systems reveals mathematical relationships and astronomical calculations that demonstrate knowledge of celestial mechanics, orbital dynamics, and interplanetary navigation principles that were not officially developed until the Space Age. The manuscript's preservation of these advanced concepts in encoded form suggests it represents medieval attempt to maintain Anunnaki-derived knowledge while protecting it from unauthorized access. Modern secret societies throughout Europe and the Americas preserve initiation rituals and symbolic systems that demonstrate clear derivation from ancient Mesopotamian mystery school traditions. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, established in the late 19th century, incorporates ceremonial elements that match precisely with ritual descriptions found in Babylonian temple archives. The order's curriculum includes instruction in astronomical calculation, symbolic interpretation, and communication procedures that parallel the training programs described in ancient priestly education texts. The accuracy of these preserved traditions and their incorporation of advanced technical knowledge suggests they represent genuine transmission of ancient information systems rather than modern reconstructions. The evidence presented throughout this investigation points to a profound truth that challenges conventional understanding of human history and development. The Sumerian tablets, documenting the Anunnaki departure, the archaeological evidence of systematic temple closures, the underground archive complexes designed for millennia-long preservation, the bloodline selection programs, and the astronomical documentation of departure routes collectively demonstrate that approximately 4,000 years ago, an advanced non-human civilization deliberately withdrew from direct governance of human affairs after establishing sophisticated systems to maintain influence and enable eventual return. The systematic nature of this withdrawal argues against conventional interpretations that dismiss these accounts as mythology or religious allegory. The administrative precision of the departure records, the technological sophistication of preserved equipment, the mathematical accuracy of astronomical calculations, and the architectural consistency of communication facilities across vast geographical distances all indicate coordinated implementation of long-term strategic planning that extended across multiple civilizations and millennia. The preservation systems established during this withdrawal period successfully maintained critical knowledge through hereditary priesthoods, mystery school traditions, and underground organizations that adapted to changing political circumstances while preserving their core missions. The cyclical return prophecies embedded within these preservation systems demonstrate that the Anunnaki withdrawal was always intended as temporary rather than permanent. The 3,600-year cycles, the 600-year subcycles, and the specific crisis triggers all suggest that return conditions were predetermined and that monitoring systems were established to identify optimal intervention windows. The correlation between ancient prophetic timelines and contemporary global conditions, including environmental degradation, technological disruption, and social breakdown, indicates that current historical circumstances may correspond with calculated return periods described in texts composed thousands of years ago. The implications of this hidden history extend far beyond academic curiosity to encompass fundamental questions about human origins, the trajectory of technological development, and the nature of consciousness itself. If human civilization developed under sustained guidance from advanced intelligences, who withdrew to allow independent development while maintaining monitoring capabilities, then our understanding of human potential and evolutionary destiny requires complete reconsideration. The knowledge preserved in sealed archives, mystery school traditions, and hereditary bloodlines may provide essential guidance for managing the transition to whatever new phase of human development the Anunnaki departure and potential return was designed to facilitate. Archaeological discoveries continue to validate elements of these ancient accounts, from underwater structures that demonstrate advanced prehistoric construction capabilities to genetic markers that suggest historical hybridization events. Modern technological developments in communication systems, Bostos' computational capabilities and space exploration are enabling humanity to independently rediscover principles and capabilities that the ancient texts indicate were once provided through direct instruction. The convergence of multiple crisis indicators with prophetic timelines, the persistence of monitoring traditions through secret societies, and the recent discoveries of previously unknown technological artifacts in ancient sites all suggest that the relationship between humanity and the departed Anunnaki may be approaching a new phase of interaction. As contemporary civilization faces challenges that threaten its continued survival and advancement, the lessons preserved in these ancient systems become increasingly relevant. The systematic approach to knowledge preservation, the emphasis on maintaining institutional continuity across catastrophic transitions, and the recognition that civilizational development follows cyclical rather than linear patterns all offer guidance for navigating current global crises. Whether the Anunnaki return occurs in our immediate future or remains generations away, the evidence of their historical presence and the systems they established for preserving their legacy demonstrate that humanity's relationship with advanced non-human intelligence extends back to the very origins of recorded history and may continue to shape our collective future in ways we are only beginning to comprehend.